The anime begins in the surroundings of a mansion, with a boy wondering what it means to see, as everyone tells him he cannot see them. His mother and brother feel sorry for him, and his father explains that to see means to be able to perceive colors and shapes, but that his eyes were affected by the scar, left by the holy knight Istoa, and that he should take pride in that. Kunon accepts this but comments to the maids that, despite being heroic scars, it is a pity he cannot see. He then wonders if the reason he is treated like a poor soul is because he cannot see. After a while, one of the maids announces that teacher Jenny has arrived and leads him to her. Kunon comments that studying magic is very boring, and the maid tells him he should take advantage of this opportunity as he has the water crest and the ability to use magic is something amazing. Upon arrival, the teacher introduces herself to Kunon, saying that from that moment she will be his magic teacher and that her name is Jenny Corse. Kunon uses a spell called Aori and manages to form a ball of water. Jenny praises him, and Kunon asks what kind of magic was used. Jenny explains that he is using magic very well to produce water, and that he created something roughly the size of an eye. When Kunon touches the eye with his hands, she apologizes, saying she only wanted to simplify so he could understand. Kunon comments that it is about the size of where he is touching, and says that he might be able to create an eye for himself with magic. The next day, Kunon is having breakfast and starts touching the things he usually eats every day, as he is curious about what they are like. He wonders what the juicy thing is that he is eating, and the maid replies that it is lettuce. He does not ask what is on his bread, and the maid replies that it is mustard. He picks up a piece of fruit and comments that it is an apple, but it is actually a plum, and asks what it is. The maid replies that since he has started eating many things, she is preparing more varieties. He does not mention that he wanted to know what he was eating, but since there are too many things on the table, he cannot smell what is in his hand, and acknowledges that he may have overdone it a little, rubbing a purple grape on his face, and asking if he can explain what Kunon is, then threatening to cut her salary. And Iko stops bothering him, saying that she got a bit too excited. Later, he is sitting with a teacher, and she asks which book he wants her to read to him. Kunon asks her to read a story about the Holy Knight. Estoa, she is surprised, and looks at Iko, who confirms it. The teacher agrees, but asks him to let her know if he feels unwell. Kunon says he will be fine because he is eager to learn about many things. Then, it is explained that some time ago, a great war broke out between the heroes of the human world and the demon lord. The hero Estoa Ruglia successfully defeated the demon lord, but lost an arm and a leg in the battle. After the war, descendants of Estoa are sometimes children who are born missing something, whether it be an arm, a leg, or even sight. People view these children as the return of a hero, calling it the hero's scars. However, Kunon does not see himself that way, as he is himself, and the magic he wields is his own. He then duplicates the water orbs, and Yuko excitedly shouts that it's perfect, both the magic control and the shape. Kunon thinks that if he perfectly controls the magic, he might even be able to create eyes for himself, and Ku says that he could be a rare mage. Kunon dispels the magic and falls to the ground, saying it's very tiring and that he is still far from his goal, as his magic is not enough yet. His maid misunderstands everything and asks if her love for him is not enough, since she dedicates so much to him, even suggesting they could sleep together. Ku doesn't reject right away, commenting that he doesn't have the knowledge or physical strength to create high-level magic. Iko says that he is only 7 years old and is just starting out, making Kunon not respond that he is already behind, as he faints using just basic magic. Iko says that suddenly increasing the amount of food is not good for the body, and that he should get used to it gradually. Kunon comments that he wants to build more muscle, but for him, walking and running isn't viable. Iko so ask why he doesn't train sword strikes, and Kunon likes the idea. Iko tells him to find a suitable teacher and leaves, saying he will talk to the boss. Kunon thanks her for the help, and she comments that she would like a raise, which gets immediately rejected as Kunon says she makes too much noise during magical training. Iko responds that it's a good thing he heard, because if he had ignored it, she would have made him cry at night in bed. The next day, when Jenny arrives for magic class, she sees Kunon training with the sword. Iko notices her presence and informs Kunon that the magic teacher has arrived. He greets the fencing teacher and says that that's all for today, as it's time for the next class. Kunon thanks Master Uro. Jenny approaches, finding his interest in fencing intriguing. Kunon comments that to use magic, knowledge, and physical strength are necessary, leaving Jenny impressed with his transformation. She asks if he wants to take a break before starting magic class, and Kunon responds that he's fine. Jenny asks him to review the spell he learned last time, called Auri, saying it's no problem for him to start from where he remembers. Kunon uses the magic, creating several balls of water, leaving Jenny shocked. Iko starts shouting that her Kunon is wonderful, Jenny can't believe what she's seeing, as she only taught him a little, and what she sees now is a completely independent advancement. She starts to find him frightening. Elsewhere, we see a maid telling Marika that her carriage is ready. Marika wonders if she really needs to go. The maid asks if she hates going to see her fiancé that much. Marika questions if Kunon thinks the same way she does, as he always has a sad face. The maid comments that it is a decision made by His Majesty, the King, and Marika agrees to go. Inside the carriage, she continues grumbling, as Kunon, who has the hero's scar, is precious to the kingdom, and that's why this political marriage was arranged. As she is from the royal family, it is her duty, but it is still tedious. Every time she asks what he likes, and what could they do to play, but he always replies that he doesn't like anything, with a sad face, saying he can't do anything and can't go anywhere. Thinking that he'll have to see that gloomy face for the rest of his life is discouraging. When she arrives at Kunon's house, she sees a completely different boy. The non-smiling greets Princess Marika, leaving her in shock. She looks at Iko, who unnecessarily comments that the princess looks beautiful and that if she were a big, bearded, middle-aged man, he wouldn't leave her alone. This makes Marika remark that the example is quite scary. What really catches her attention, however, is Kunon. He asks if everything is okay, and Marika questions what happened to him. Kunon comments that he has started to like magic, leaving Marika confused. Then he takes his wand and summons the Aori magic, enchanting Marika. She remarks that it is very beautiful, and Kunon forms a rainbow, impressing her even more. Kunon apologizes for always bothering her, and Marika also apologizes. He extends his hand, asking her to listen to what he has to say, as many fun things have happened. She takes his hand, and they both go out for a walk at night. On the way back home, Marika comments that it was a lot of fun and that she is looking forward to the next time. Kunon thinks it was the first time he extended his hand to someone, and that makes him a knight. We then see a flashback of Kunon asking how he should interact with Princess Marika, as he wanted to become a man worthy of her. The teacher says she will teach him about noble behavior and etiquette. That same night, Jenny is thinking about what she should do, as it is not normal for a boy to be able to keep 7 water balls at the same time, something that is not even possible for her. She realizes that Kunon has improved too quickly, and that there is nothing more she can teach him. Jenny wonders if it is time to move on to intermediate level magic, but quickly closes the book when someone scolds her for making too much noise in the library. Jenny thinks that children should only learn basic magic, and that this job should be something easy, with a very high salary. She is afraid to raise the level of magic, as it could be useful. It's not something safe. Kunon is only 7 years old, and it's too early for him to learn advanced magic. Even so, she is willing to find a way and keep working for her own livelihood. The next day, Jenny tells Kunon that they will do something different, and he replies that it's no problem. She then explains that Auri, the magic he uses, is simply the production of water, and that they will now analyze the nature of the magic. Kunon comments that producing water and making it float allows for maintaining a spherical shape. Jenny congratulates him for noticing that. She explains that temperature, viscosity, components, color, shape, shine, aroma, and taste, when analyzed, show that there are several types of magic. Even though they are all of the water type, they can be very different. Jenny creates 2 balls of water and asks Kunon to touch them. He touches both and realizes that one is cold and the other is warm. Jenny explains that by adding arrangements to magic, originality is created. Kunon asks what that means, and she replies that this is the decisive individuality of a magician, which can also be called a difference in talent. Kunon asks if this is the ability to alter the details of the magic. Then he invokes the Aori magic again, lets the water fall into a cup, and asks Iko to try it. She takes the cup and drinks, tasting apple flavor. Kunon says it's plum, getting back at her. Iko comments that it tastes good and is easy to drink. Jenny is horrified because he managed to create an arrangement that she spent the whole night thinking about how to achieve in just a few seconds. She said Kunon is capable of everything. Kunon comments that it was quite difficult and that he will strive even harder. At night, in bed, Kunon thinks that he can identify the shape and aroma of things, but he doesn't know the colors. Thus, it is difficult to perceive magical changes, and he concludes that he won't be able to create an eye. The next day, Iko asks what Kunon wants to drink, and he asks for tea with milk. Iko asks him to provide hot water, and Kunon does that easily, surprising Iko, who comments that for someone who He can't use magic. That seems like a divine miracle. As he passes the ball of water over the apples, Kunon feels something strange and stands up in despair. Iko asks what happened, and Kunon says he thinks he managed to see. Iko gets really excited and says that if he is lying, she will slap him. Kunon asks her to calm down, saying that he still isn't sure and that he probably didn't really see. Iko pinches his cheek, saying that he needs to have a better sense of humor since such tasteless jokes are unacceptable. Kunon then says that he thinks he managed to see the colors through the magic. He picks a green apple and asks if it's correct to say that it is red. Iko replies that it is not. He picks another one and asks if that one is red, and Iko confirms, explaining that the colors and the names of the colors still don't correspond for him, as he has never seen them before. Kunon confirms, and Iko says that green apples are light green, which leaves Kunon even more confused by the explanation. Iko asks if he knows how many apples are in the pot, and Kunon answers that there are 5, 3 red and 2 green. Iko hugs him, saying that it's a miracle. Then she goes to report everything to Kunon's father, who is surprised. Iko explains that the effective range is still low, but he managed to distinguish the colors. The closer he is, the better he can see, and the effect becomes even clearer through touch. The father asks if Kunon can read books, and Iko confirms, saying that he can identify the colors by running his fingers over them. He doesn't know the letters yet, but he is fascinated by books and illustrated guides. The father feels relieved and asks why they don't go back to the main house, since Kunon is living separately to avoid making others feel bad for him. Iko denies, saying that Kunon is about to go through a big change. The father agrees, but asks if she isn't trying too hard to take care of him alone. Iko replies that everything is fine, and the father comments that her joy is good for his son. Iko, not missing the opportunity, asks for a raise, which is denied again. In the gardens, Kunon says he is looking forward to seeing teacher Jenny, for he wants her to evaluate his new magic. He uses the aura again, but this time the magic is greater and red in color. His mother, brother, and father arrive in the garden, and upon seeing their mother, Kunon loses control of the magic, getting all wet. When calling for her, his mother faints, leaving Kunon confused. Iko then explains that red is also the color of blood. His father punishes him, cutting his allowance for 2 months, and reduces Iko's salary for 3 months, sending her into despair and causing her to faint. In the end, we see Jenny terrified in a corner, wondering how far this boy will go and if perhaps he will achieve the highest title of magic, known as the Blue Mage. Kunon is now 9 years old, and his father, Gurion, begins to worry about his education. He calls his brother and tells him about his intention to send Kunon to school. Gurion explains the plan to enroll him in the noble school, but his brother expresses concern. Kunon had never left the castle since he was born, and he fears the boy may struggle to relate to others outside the palace. Gurion had already thought of this, and that is exactly why he called Kunon's brother first. He begs his brother to help the boy at school and ensure nothing goes wrong. In a flashback, Kunon's brother remembers the day he wanted to go out to play with Gurion. That day, Gurion was worried because Kunon couldn't see, but the brother reassured him, saying he would hold his hand to make sure he wouldn't fall. However, just as Kunon took his second step, his leg slipped, and the brother accidentally let go of his hand, which unfortunately led to Kunon's fall. One can imagine that Kunon hasn't trusted his brother as much since then. Still, without a shadow of a doubt, Kunon's brother assures Gurion that he will hold Kunon and make sure nothing happens to him. Meanwhile, Kunon is with Iko, practicing his magic as usual. He is training hydromancy, a magic used to find lost things. Iko teases him, saying he should find her youth, and he responds by reminding her that she is already as cheerful and young as she should be, and there is no need for that when she asks him to find her future husband. He replies by saying that she is a beautiful young lady and that several men would line up for her. He himself would be interested if he weren't a nobleman. The playful conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Lady Flora. As always, Lady Flora teaches him the things he must know. Suddenly, she becomes uneasy. The boy is now 9 years old. She has already taught him many things and raised him to be a knight. She wonders if she is making a mistake, and if she should have trained him to be a more cheerful and carefree man. Kuno notices that she is troubled and asks what she is thinking. Looking at how cute and lovely he is, she feels happy to have been part of the upbringing of such an adorable boy. Later that night, Iko takes Kuno to the main quarters. On the way, she feels very cold and asks Kuno for help. Without hesitation, Kuno creates warm water for them, and Iko hugs the water for comfort. The water is better than any he has made before, and she excitedly comments on how pleasant it is. He also enjoys the praise but says it is just a prototype. She really needs something that warm to have a good night's rest, and he starts considering making a bed with the same density. Kuno is very worried about the fact that Gurion has called for him. He wonders if he did something wrong, but Zico reassures him, saying there is nothing wrong, and reminding him that he learned from blood lessons and did nothing wrong. While they walk, he reminds her that he only did that because she asked him to give it his all. She also doesn't hate what he did, but Gurion does, so their opinions don't matter. They arrive at the castle, and the servant greets them. He mentions Brother X and recognizes him immediately. He greets his brother and accompanies him to their parents' room. On the way, X asks if Kuno needs him to hold his hand, but Kuno says no. He has grown up and now understands his surroundings, managing to walk by himself. Islo remembers the days when he held Kuno's hand, and seeing his brother grow so much makes him excited. Kuno notices that his brother is pensive and asks what's wrong, but Xlo says it's nothing important. They arrive at their parents' room, and Gurion tells Kunon what Miss Flora informed him. He completed all his basic education, which is quite remarkable. However, now he needs to attend the school for nobles. Gurion explains that every noble must attend this school, as it is part of the requirements. However, due to Kunon's special condition, they had received permission from the king to train him at home. Still, he would be at a disadvantage if he never went to school, so he should consider that possibility. Kunon vehemently refuses. He tells his father that he is not interested, and that since it is not mandatory, he does not want to go. He starts to think that his father just wants to get rid of him, and asks if Gurion is upset about his allowance, since he always complained he spent too much. Gurion insists that it is not about that. He states that it is simply necessary for a noble. Kunon asks again if it is because of the last incident with blood, but Gurion denies it. His mother and X try to calm the difficult situation, but without success. When Kunon finally calms down, Gurion explains that the reason for him to go is that nobles who do not attend school always remain at a disadvantage, and his fiancée Marika would be less valued if he didn't go. Faced with this, Kunon changes his mind and agrees to go. Gurion informs him that he will not need to go for long, just to take the tests. There are only 4 exams, and he will go only 4 times, once for each exam. Marika and X will also take the exams, so they will go together. His mother is happy that he accepted and immediately begins to prepare him for school. When Kunon leaves with his mother, Gurion calls Islo aside and warns him about the possibility that other nobles, seeing Marika and Kunon together, may feel envy. Islo assures his father that he will protect them and stand by their side. Later, Kunon meets Marika and tells her the news. She is excited to go to school with him, but Kunon worries about how interested nobles in her might treat him. Marika is not concerned about that, and tells him not to fret. This only makes him wonder if she is not popular at school. To reassure him, she says that she is indeed popular, and that there are several men after her, the number of which is equivalent to the fingers of one hand, 5. Now he is confident in himself, so he doesn't have any more problems. Kunon's uniform is ready. He dresses him up and he looks like someone from royalty. Iko teases him and Kunon responds as usual. His response surprises those who have never seen him so joyful before. They enter the carriage and Kunon uses his water magic to stabilize the wheels during the journey, then bidding farewell to his parents. The carriage departs while his mother cries in front of the house. Inside the carriage, X notices how smooth the ride is and acknowledges that it is thanks to Kunon's magic. Upon seeing Zulo, Kunon realizes that his brother was worried about him and his safety. He states that he has grown now and feels confident, so Zulo doesn't need to worry anymore. He recalls when he slipped and fell as a child, and Zulo held his hand, admitting that his brother felt extremely guilty and took full responsibility for the fall. However, Kunon reassures him, saying he knows X wasn't to blame. He tells his brother that back then, he felt bad about life and wanted to die. Now, he no longer wants to die. He is resilient and assures that he will live no matter what happens, even if he is the last human to die. This is encouraged when he sees how mature his younger brother has become. Now he doesn't even know whether Kunon is his younger or older brother. He admits that Kunon has changed, and wonders if this is due to his close companionship with Iko. Soon, they approach the school and Kunon notices first. He warns X that they are already close, and X wonders how he noticed this so quickly. Kunon reveals that he can now sense the presence of humans around. They arrive at the school and Marika appears to greet them. She compliments how handsome his uniform looks, and the cheerful atmosphere between the two makes X wonder why they are so happy. Marika moves to guide them inside the school, but Kunon steps back. He uses his magic to read the sounds and feelings around and realizes there are several people there. He knows that if he were his old self, he would have backed out and gone home, but now he will not stop and will not be a coward. He turns to Marika and asks if she could, granting the honor of being the lady among them that day. He asks her to hold his hand and lead him into the school. Inside the school, Professor Cast, one of the teachers, awaits Kunon's arrival. She is restless, knowing that Kunon bears the hero's scar, and is unsure if she has the capacity to care for such a child, since she has been tasked with guiding him through the school. Amidst her thoughts, she hears the students commenting in wonder about how beautiful Kunon is, saying they have never seen such a beautiful child. Not caring about what the other students are saying, the children enter the classroom and pass by Cast, who also watches them in admiration. She snaps back to herself and quickly goes to meet them. She introduces herself as the one responsible for Kunon, and he greets her. He bows like a lady and says that he needs to be a beautiful lady that day. Cast does not understand what he means, but Kunon insists that although he is biologically a boy, on that day, he will be a girl. She is confused but does not press the matter, as she needs to accompany him. Kunon says goodbye to Mirika and Islo, expressing hope to see them later for a meal. Some students watch the scene from the adjacent building. Among them is Prince Lial, the sixth prince of the realm and Mirika's brother. His friends, who are also his subordinates, comment on Kunon. He is the first person to be born with the hero's scar in nearly 100 years and has received the king's blessings. They immediately notice that Lial is uncomfortable with the conversation, so they change the subject to avoid irritating him. Cast leads Kunon to the classroom and asks if he has heard of the advancement exam. She explains that there are 5 of these exams, and that, although they are normally taken over a long period, she has received orders from the king and Gurion for Kunon to take all 5 in a short span of time. Kunon is aware of this and acknowledges that it is nepotism. He tells Cast that his father and the king are close friends, and that is why this exception was made for him. Even so, he knows that this is wrong and goes against the integrity of the school. Cast is not interested in conversations involving the politics of the city, so she tells him to just take the exam and stop talking. However, Kunon does not stop. He continues talking until he finishes the test. The test collects the tests and will correct them. She is completely shocked to realize that he got all the answers right without missing any. After that, Kunon meets Mirika for lunch together. However, before they reach the cafeteria, Lyle appears with his subordinates. He asks to confirm if Kunon really received the blessing of the king. Mirika becomes visibly nervous, and Kunon notices this, although he does not know who the boy is. Zilu also arrives and tries to calm Lion, but the prince continues to cause trouble to protect his fiancée. Kunon takes water from a nearby cup and spills it around Lion's pants, making it look like he wet himself. He then calls everyone's attention to the fact that Lion has wet his pants. Lion denies it, but the evidence speaks for itself. He then leaves with his friends, embarrassed and furious. Both Mirika and X know it was Kunon who did that. X looks at him suspiciously, but Kunon simply says they should go eat. During the meal, Kunon asks who Lial is and is shocked to find out that he is his future brother-in-law. He wonders if siblings can be cruel to their own siblings, since his own brother has never been like that. He is surprised to learn that there are siblings who do not care about their brothers. He is just happy that X is his brother and that he cares so much about him. X, however, is worried about having provoked someone so important, but Mirika says that Kunon is just like that. The guy only hopes they don't get into more trouble. Kunon, in turn, seems to be having a lot of fun, just hoping he doesn't step on any more toes in the cafeteria. Kuno asks America why Prince Lyle placed himself in his way without hiding his violent nature. She replies that he appeared to pressure him. She comments that her brother is the 6th prince, and she the 9th princess, so her position is inferior in the royal hierarchy. But her fiancé is the mage who bears the hero's scar. His status has risen quickly. Now that Kunon has become known, they will be above high society. But beyond all this, Mirika is happy to be his fiancé, and Kunon is too, suggesting that when he sees the king, he kneels in gratitude. That said, he wants to apologize to Liu, but neither Io nor Marika allow it. Next, we move on to the teacher. It's mentioned that today is Kunon's last exam, so he must learn to modify the texture of water. Kunon turns water into ice, but the feeling is like that of an apple. Jenny suggests he touch various things to replicate the texture. Later, we see Kunon touching a horse, and I find that strange. But at that moment, Mirika arrives. Kunon comments that, since this is the last day he will hear her voice, he feels as if his world is filling with sadness. Irika tells the exaggerated Kunon that they are not leaving until evening, alleviating his sadness in a second. After that, the three go to take the final exam. Kunon is excited to feel like he is in a real school, although he is also sad for not being with his teacher. She says she will be watching and wishes him good luck. It becomes clear that Kunon and the teacher have more trust in each other. The protagonist responds that this was because of the exams. She recounts that she became a teacher to follow the man she loved to a noble school. However, the man failed the exam, and she ended up alone. The other two do not understand how a teacher can share her life with a student, and just at that moment, another student speaks to Marika, asking her to introduce them to Kunon. With all the chivalry, Kunon introduces himself as the fiancé of Princess Marika Uglia and the younger brother of Isha. With that, he feels relieved knowing that his brother and his fiancée have friends, as no one was talking to them. However, Marika explains that if she was seen alone, it was so she could spend more time with him, so she asked her friends for a little peace. Since Kunon didn't know this, he thanks the princess for her consideration but admits he was also worried. Obviously, he couldn't ask if they had no friends or if they were alone at school. Thus, he is glad his brother is not alone, and that the princess has friends. Otherwise, he would have had to console them, comparing their loneliness to his own situation, saying that it is okay not to have friends. So much drama leaves everyone speechless, but Marika, he understands that it doesn't make a difference for him not to have friends. Kunon confirms and mentions that humans do well alone, which leaves the room intrigued. On the other hand, Lila is informed that it is already time for the exam. He orders them to wait for him, but his subordinates doubt that, even being a prince, the teacher would decide to wait for him. After all, it is the final exam. It is then that the bell rings. The students sit in their places. Our protagonist was about to be guided by Mirik, but at that moment, Liu appears to separate them. People begin to murmur. Lio notices this, and remembering what the castle maid said about him, becomes enraged, as no one dares to say this to his face. However, suddenly, Kunon holds his hand and introduces himself to him. Everyone is surprised. Lio demands that he let go, but Kunon clings like a biting turtle, saying that he is his brother-in-law, and therefore, they should get to know each other. Thus, we see the two struggling, and Kunon makes it clear that he did not give him permission to touch him. Kunon emphasizes how manly he looks, and adds that by touching him, he can assume that his face is very masculine. He guarantees that if his eyes could see, he would have contemplated his face so much that he would have made a hole from staring. This leaves Liu blushing. Everyone begins to laugh. The blonde, embarrassed, asks Kunon to let him go. Kunon releases him, and then the whole problem ends. During the exam, we see that the prince seemed a bit thoughtful, but at the end, after evaluating the tests, the teacher announces that everyone passed. Thus, Kunon returns home. He says goodbye to all his classmates, and even to the teacher, to whom he offers his brother's hand. This is observed by Liu, who, with a smile, comments to his companions to go somewhere else, returning to magic practice. Jenny asks Kunon to create a whirlpool. First, Kunon creates a sphere of water and makes it spin. Then, they ask him to interrupt the impact and divide it into 10. With effort, Kunon succeeds. They also ask him to reach red, green, and yellow, as well as to alter the texture, and he manages to do everything without issues. Genius congratulates him, saying it was magnificent before leaving. Kunon asks for a moment, mentioning that he made a modification by adding shape and temperature to the texture. Thus, we see that he shapes a sphere into a bird, which then flies away. Jenny is surprised, falls to the ground, and says that it's all over. A little later, we see the two of them having tea. Jenny wants to talk about something. Kunon thinks it must be dinner to celebrate his graduation, and informs her that she is also invited. She comments that it's not about that, but that graduation is a good time to tell the truth, asking if he is mentally prepared, as she needs to share something very impactful. We see Kunon worried about this and taking a sip of tea before continuing. Jenny asks Iko to step out. When she leaves, Kunon clenches his fist, saying that it is too sudden, imagining that Jenny is a goddess of the night sky, and that she needs to leave to return to her world. Jenny likes the story, but that's not it. The truth is that she no longer has anything to teach him. She confesses that for some time she hasn't had anything new to teach. She has already taught him everything about elemental magic, which wasn't for attack. Now, Kunon even masters magic better than she does. He just needs to learn a new spell to surpass her. Kunon stands up saying that this isn't true. He confesses that he liked the tricks and ruses she used to teach him, even when she was just trying to instruct him with her magic. Jenny realizes that Kunon had already noticed her. Despair, which puts her more at ease. Kunon says that his magic expanded thanks to her tricks, recalling when Jenny spoke about Ari, comparing the sphere he created to an eyeball. For Kunon, that interaction was the only thing that made him want to live. She saved him. Therefore, if she is resigning because her salary is low, he will tell his father to increase her pay. She insists that, in fact, she feels bad because she receives much more than she deserves, and she doesn't deserve that much for not doing anything. She steps closer, holds his shoulders, and says that he will be better off with a truly capable teacher to guide him, so he can become as great as he should be. When she kneels to say goodbye, all the aquatic animals he had created, they also touch her body, trying to persuade her to stay, but she does not want to. She says that those little tricks will no longer help him. Even so, he insists that those little tricks are exactly what he wants and needs. If they are so important, why does he keep calling them tricks, as if they hold no value? In the end, all his pleading and supplications are in vain. She has already made her decision and leaves without looking back. Outside the castle, she looks back and admits that he has the skill and talent to become an extraordinary sorcerer. She thinks about how hard he works and trains constantly, acknowledging that he started at a disadvantage because of the hero's curse he bore, but he managed to overcome that disadvantage and become as great as he is now. Therefore, she will not lose to him and will ensure that she also continues to evolve. Later, Iko finds Kunon and informs him that Lady Flora, his elementary school teacher, has also left. She explains that Flora left because he graduated and no longer needed elementary lessons. When Kunon wonders why Flora didn't wait to say goodbye to him, Iko reveals that Flora said she would be too emotional if she had to say farewell. Like a good boy, Kunon promises to write to Flora and say goodbye by letter. Iko suggests that in the content of the letter, he should ask if Flora knows any good-looking, well-paid, single man in her circle, so that Iko can get married. Upon discovering that Iko also wants to marry and leave him, Kunon's heart is broken. Iko insists that he will be fine without her, but Kunon only feels like he will be an orphan. Ginny left him, Flora left him, and now Iko also wants to marry. He concludes that he will not ask Flora anything about a man. During dinner with his parents, he recounts that Ginny asked him to find a good sorcerer to teach him, as she was no longer good enough for him. He then asks if they know any talented sorcerers they could recommend. At that moment, the memory brings to mind a sorcerer he heard about at the academy. He doesn't quite remember the name, but when he mentions part of it, his mother instantly recognizes it: Zioni. The royal sorcerer Kunon wants Zioni as his master. At the same time, he asks Gurion to call him. Gurion interrupts him, saying that Zioni is a royal sorcerer. Royal sorcerers respond only to the king and the members of the royal family. No other noble may have access to them, much less bring them to their own castle. Kunon tries to convince his father, reminding him of his close relationship with the king, and asking if he couldn't use that influence to get Zioni. When Gurion insists that it is impossible, Kunon comes up with a plan. He would accompany Gurion to the palace, get lost inside, and then the royal sorcerers would find him, and he would become their apprentice. A clearly flawed plan. Gurion wastes no time in saying that the plan is absurd, but his mother believes in him. She is easily moved by the desires of Kunon, and Gurion, in turn, is easily moved by his wife's wishes. In the end, Kunon's mother manages to convince Gurion to at least try to speak with the king, although she makes no promises. Gurion sends a formal request to the king, asking for Zioni at the palace. One of the princesses takes Gurion's request to the Grandmaster. The Grandmaster wonders what kind of noble would make such an absurd request to have a royal sorcerer as a master. However, when the princess reveals that the boy is her sister's fiancé, the Grandmaster immediately realizes that it is Kunon, and his jaw drops in shock. Finally, if you made it this far, comment the word magic to show that you reached the end. A few days pass since then, and finally, Kunon receives the call from the royal palace to present himself to the royal wizard. He enters a carriage alongside his father, who seems quite pleased with how things have turned out. Kunon comments that the friendship between the king and his father must be quite deep for him to be willing to fulfill such a request. However, his father replies that the real reason they were given the opportunity to meet the royal wizard is that the court's chief mage has shown great interest in Kunon and his abilities, wanting to meet him in person. Then, the father asks what kind of magic Kunon can already use. At that point, Kunon immediately intones a spell and creates a small sphere of water that quickly transforms into a black cat, settling in his lap. His father is astonished, saying he can't believe that something like this can be achieved through magic, and begins to pet the little kitten. He is surprised to realize that the cat doesn't even seem magical or made of water. To the touch, it is exactly like any ordinary cat one might find on the street. Kunon explains that he has only recently managed to master the appearance of animals, as before he could only create completely transparent creatures, but in his recent attempts, he has managed to change the colors of the animals as he wishes. His father begins to play with the cat, all delighted. and Kunon asks if they shouldn't adopt a real cat for home. Like a typical father, he refuses, claiming that a cat would make too much mess around the house. Furthermore, he might end up tripping over it and hurting himself. To top it off, he states that Kunon's mother prefers dogs. Anyway, he really has no choice when it comes to another animal. Soon after, they enter the capital and are immediately greeted by a silver-haired girl named Reicha, the second princess of the kingdom and older sister of Marika. Kunon warmly greets her, saying he is very fortunate to have such a beautiful woman as her as a sister-in-law. His father wonders if his son is the street type, but decides to think about it later. Reicha smiles and comments that she has heard many things about Kunon. Through her younger sister, who would love to have a long conversation with him, she also notices the cat and asks if it needs any special food. However, at the moment Kunon's father places the cat back on the ground, Kunon ends the spell and the cat turns back into just a puddle of water. Reicha then realizes that Kunon is much more skilled than she had initially imagined, while the father feels a little sad for not having had the chance to give the cat a name. Reicha offers to take Kunon to the Black Tower. The father says he will also talk to the king and perhaps return home afterwards. Kunon asks him not to worry, since after visiting the Black Tower, he intends to see Marika and maybe take her on a date. His father tells him to enjoy his time and promises to arrange a carriage whenever he decides to come back home. Then, Reicha takes Kunon to the Black Tower and, on the way, asks if he is comfortable walking or if he needs any help. Kunon responds that he is perfectly fine and immediately begins to ask a series of questions that leave her confused, as they are all on a level comparable to Stephen Hawking's theories when it comes to magic. She says she cannot have such an advanced discussion while walking, and asks if he knows how many children the current king has. Kunon had never thought about that until then. Reicha then reveals that the king is a real ladies' man and has produced one after another, 7 princes and 10 princesses. She is the second princess, while Marika is the 9th. The most interesting thing is that, in this country, the succession to the throne does not work in the traditional way where the throne automatically passes to the eldest son. There, they follow something called meritocracy, where all princes and princesses are evaluated based on their skills and merits, which can vary according to their talents and the level of dedication they show to a given art. This means that even the youngest prince or princess has the same chance to claim the throne, regardless of age. She also explains that she herself has already given up her right to the throne in this succession, choosing to become a mage, now dedicating herself to honing her skills to become one of the best witches in the country as they walk down the corridor. A sudden sensation draws Kunon to a window where he gazes absently towards a dark tower from which he can feel the presence of all kinds of different magical beings. Shortly thereafter, Rexa tells him something very important, as she believes there is a small possibility that he might be dragged unwittingly into the struggle for succession. She advises him not to affiliate with any faction until he is sure of his decision, and also to never say anything that could be used against him to tarnish his image. In return for such valuable advice, Kunon decides to reciprocate by showing her his special magic technique. He freezes a thin layer of water over his shoes, creating a film of ice that allows them to basically glide. She loves the idea and immediately asks to try it out. Kunon quickly uses the magic on her as well, and then the two begin to slide down the corridors like two complete madcaps, as the guards try to chase them, since they cannot allow Rexa to be harmed. Unfortunately for the guards, Rexa and Kunon are much faster and manage to escape from them. However, their luck soon runs out when a knight spots the two and begins to pursue them. Kunon asks if they shouldn't stop, but Rexa is having too much fun and says they can probably shake off the knight. That's where they are mistaken, as the knight manages to catch up to them and takes them to the garden, where they receive a stern reprimand. Later, they are escorted to the tower, where Kunon is soon introduced to Rondemond, the chief sorcerer of the kingdom. Kunon feels humble in his presence, as he realizes how vast the world truly is. Previously, he thought Rexa's magic was impressive, but, compared to Rondemonde's, it seemed to be on a completely different level. Rondemonde immediately asks if he was born with a water crest, and Kunon replies that yes, admitting afterward that he doesn't quite understand how these crests work. Rondemonde explains that there are 7 different types of crests that wizards can possess, each related to their magical affinity: fire, water, earth, wind, light, darkness, and thunder. Moreover, each coat of arms has a star rating that ranges from 1 to 5, which makes Kunon's 2-star rating relatively common. Rexa comments that she is also a 2-star wind mage. Kunon immediately understands and says he can feel this, comparing himself and Arecha to common processed cheeses, while Rondimond would be like a handcrafted wheel of aged parmesan. Rondimond agrees with the description and reveals that he is actually a 4-star mage. Shortly after, Rondimond takes them to the training field below and warns that he will test Kunon's magical skills to assess his potential. Kunon feels a bit intimidated, wondering if this means that a real mage would be willing to become his tutor if he passes the test. However, he doesn't have much time to think about it, as Rondimond immediately calls over an older student who is also a real mage and asks him to demonstrate his water magic. The mage chants the incantation, and immediately several magical water droplets appear in the air, forming a bright and beautiful pattern. Rondimond then turns to Kunon and tells him to surpass the boy's magic with his own. Kunon remembers what Jen always told him, that he not only could create water, but also manipulate the water that already existed in the environment. Until then, this had never been a problem for him, but he had never tried to take control of the water created by another mage. He realizes that Rondimond has effortlessly created a challenge that neither he nor Jen had considered before, and now he would have to deal with it on the fly. Still, Kunon decides to give it a try and immediately attempts to wrest control of the magic from the silver-haired mage. At first, he believes it will work, but soon meets an obstacle as the water droplets begin to resist, given that the other mage can easily maintain control over them. Rondimond watches with great interest to see what will happen next. However, Kunon is not one to give up easily, so he gives it his all, and uses all his strength to try to take control. To everyone's surprise, Kunon manages to wrest 2 of the water spheres from the hands of the highly trained and experienced mage. Before Rondimond decides to end the test, Kunon falls to his knees, panting, while the silver-haired wizard honestly admits that he never imagined a simple boy could take 2 of his water spheres. He then turns to Rondimond and says he would be willing to accept Kunon as his disciple, but immediately other wizards start to voice their opinions, stating that they would also like to have him as an apprentice. Rondimond tells everyone to be quiet, as he still wants to see what Kunon is capable of and asks him to create something he has imagined. Kunon immediately creates a trampoline using his water magic, and Rondimond begins to jump on it, having fun like a child. The other wizards line up, eager to try as well, curious to understand how it works and if they could reproduce the technique. Rondimond, however, tells Kunon that he wants him to spend the night in the castle so they can see what else he is capable of doing. Kunon responds that, unfortunately, he already has a date with Marika and needs to take her to dinner that night. At that moment, Richa asks if he can create other animals with his magic or even humans. Kunon replies that he can do both and immediately creates a human puppet made of water in the shape of his maid. The technique is not yet perfect, so the figure is a bit translucent, and he also hasn't quite adjusted the movements, which is still a problem. For now, the silver-haired wizard asks if the puppets can do anything, and Kunon shares about the time he tried to make them fly, but the idea was not well received as the puppet looked very silly while doing so. Rondimond immediately becomes interested, and Kunon is forced to demonstrate. He starts to play with the puppet, making it go up and down in the air repeatedly, frightening half the people in the castle. This causes him to get scolded once more, and everyone ends up having to apologize again. Soon the sun sets, and Rondimond tells Kunon that he has successfully passed the tests, and that he will personally assign a sorcerer to help him learn to use his magic more efficiently. Kunon beams with joy and rushes to tell the news to his father, who becomes irritated to learn that complaints have been made about his son. Twice in just a few hours, and he reprimands him for being irresponsible with his magic. Shortly after, his father departs back to the mansion, leaving Kunon behind with Recha, who realizes he needs to meet Marika, or they will be late for dinner. Recha says they will have to use magic to reach Marika in time, so they decide to conduct a little experiment. Kunon creates a bubble of water, and Recha uses her wind magic to propel them forward, as if they were on Aladdin's magic carpet, soaring through the skies and getting near Marika's chambers in no time. Unfortunately, Recha forgets to gradually lessen the magic and cuts it off all at once, causing them to fall. They end up being caught by the Knight of Ario for the 3rd time that day, who is quite irritated and once again gives them a long lecture. Meanwhile, Marika continues to be nervous about the scheduled meeting, which is understandable since it is her first date. Then they inform her that Kunon has already arrived. Laura is about to tell Marika that she was pretending to keep her composure, but as soon as she hears Kunon's name, she jumps for joy. At the entrance, the protagonist greets her in a chivalrous manner. He comments that he was very well escorted at school. However, now it is his turn to escort her, and then he takes her hand. At this moment, Laura peeks through the door to meet Kunon. After that, they arrive at the restaurant. Inside, Kunon toasts to Marika's beauty. Laura realizes how chivalrous the protagonist is, understanding how he managed to win Marika over. The princess asks how it was at the Black Tower. Kunon shares that he met her sister, Raicha, an incredible people, especially the magic of the great master Keho Azul. He also mentions that he passed the test, although he still doesn't know who his instructor will be, but that everything will turn out as perfect as Marika's nails. He mentions that he heard many stories, but theirs are even more fascinating. They shine like a scarecrow in a field of wheat swayed by the wind. Kunon uses so many strange references that Marika begins to find him odd. Still, if Marika is happy, nothing else matters. At that moment, Kunon speaks directly to Marika. He comments that this dinner is the best he can offer right now, but that when they marry, they will be able to live like this always, and he wishes to walk alongside her in the future. These words win over the helpers and Laura, who start calling Kunon a wonderful guy. When dinner ends, we see Marika tossing in her bed because of Kunon. The next morning, the protagonist is working when Iko calls him to help her wash clothes using his water magic. She comments that he has been making uniforms, but Iko scolds him for staying locked up since he returned, saying that a child's job is to soak up the sun to grow. Kunon realizes he is shorter than Iko and asks if women like tall men. Iko replies that some do, but she likes Kunon, whether he is tall or short. Kunon was about to comment on what he likes about her, but feels it would be betraying Marika, so Iko calls him a womanizer. After washing everything, Kunon asks Iko if any letter has arrived for him. When she says no, he imagines that they have not yet decided who his master will be. At that point, we see Victor looking for Chan. Since there's no response, Victor goes to his office wishing to come out alive. Upon entering, he sees many papers piled up and Ion waking up from the floor. Victor informs him that the Grand Master is calling him, and he opens his eyes. Back at Kunon's house, he is cheerful to finally have a new teacher. Iko asks what the name is, and Kunon responds that it is Sinroll. Iko gets excited to hear that, recalling that he is the famous handsome wizard that everyone talks about. Desperate, she asks the protagonist what to do, as she needs to look presentable in front of that knight. Kunon tries to complain about her wanting to look nice for another man who is not him, but he ends up agreeing, saying that she should get ready immediately. In another scene, we see Marika getting ready at the request of Raicha. When finished, they head towards the castle entrance. In the corridor, however, they encounter their other two sisters, Everil and Lidalha. They try to intimidate Mera, but Richa protects her and puts the two in their place, making them step back. Without further distractions, the two continue the conversation. Richa is irritated for not being chosen as Kunon's master, questioning why they had to choose that guy. We then return to the protagonist, who is calm, enjoying tea, while Iko is extremely nervous. At that moment, the carriage arrives, from which Princess Marika descends. As usual, Kunon greets her with many compliments. Then, Zeon also gets down from the carriage, and upon seeing him, Iko starts mentally savoring him. Kunon, in turn, feels that dense mana and compares it to honey, understanding its power. He introduces himself to Zeon and asks if he can call him Master Mel. Zeon forbids him, making it clear that he should call him Sir and that he hasn't even accepted to be his magic instructor. In fact, he didn't even want to come. Kunon understands that he was forced by the hierarchy of society and comments, lamenting that such things happen. Zeoli mentions that old Landemode told him to come because there was an interesting boy, so he came. Kunon asks if it was the Grand Master Blue Cheese. Who sent Master Mel? These nicknames annoy Zeoli. Observing the situation, Dario intervenes. Kunon recognizes him and thanks him for helping them the other day. Surprised, Marika asks the protagonist if they know each other. Kunon replies that, more than acquaintances, they have gone through 3 peculiar situations and changes the subject, asking if Sansei only is pretty, whispering what it really is. Marika is surprised, after all. Kunon does not see, so he does not know what it is to be pretty. This irritates Zeonlei, who asks if he is laughing at him. Kunon responds that, of course not, which makes Zeonlei find everything even stranger. Thus, they get to know each other better. Kunon thanks Marika for bringing Zeonlei but admits he also wanted to see her, his fiancée. Kunon reciprocates, but Zeonlei interrupts the flirting to have a fun conversation about magic. By the smile he makes, Dario comments that he seems to want to mock Kunon, while Iko gets lost in his gaze. Zeonlei asks if Kunon knows what superposition is. Kunon answers that spells are released from circles drawn with mana, and that superposition is duplicating that circle. Then, Zeonlei asks how many he can use. With humility, Kunon responds 31. This surprises Zeonlei, but he claims he can reach 50. Kunon thinks that's incredible and asks how he did it. Zeonlei also wants to know how Kunon overcame the 20-layer wall. Kunon explains that he overlapped the emblems and that he discovered this on his own, although with many trials and errors. This continues to surprise Zeoli, who remembers when Victor and Raisha confronted him to be Kunon's master, even though he didn't want to see him when he came before. He responds that he only came because the master found Kunon interesting. Victor and Raisha comment on how talented Kunon is, in addition to the tricks he performs with his magic. Now, having met him in person, Zeon-Lee understands why there was so much fuss around Kunon, asserting that he is a prodigy. After that, he asks Kunon to show what he knows how to do. However, Kunon wants to learn how to reach 50 layers, but Zeon-Lee says it would be a waste of time to teach him, something he still isn't capable of doing. Therefore, if he wants to learn, he must demonstrate his worth and then beg to be taught. Upon hearing this, Marika comments that Kunon would never do such a thing, but he immediately begins to beg to be taught, even praising him. He says he wants to see his generosity and affection, in addition to his lonely side. He claims he would do anything if Kunon teaches him how to use 50 layers. Although he asks for this, Zion ends up feeling uncomfortable and clarifies that Kunon does not call him master because he has not yet accepted it. Nevertheless, he will show just how impressive he is. Saying this, he mentions that he possesses the 3-star Earth emblem, then creates an Earth wall and orders Kunon to destroy it. He also asks him to create a waterbed so he can observe, but upon touching the bed, Zion is enchanted by how soft it is and eventually falls asleep. While Kunon touches the wall, he realizes it's soft, but the mana makes it hard. He remembers Jane's explanations about magic. The emblems create magic circles that are set to form spells, serving as the foundation for each one. Superposition is the number of times these circles are divided and reconstructed, and this number indicates the level and originality of the magic. That wall is a masterpiece of 40 layers. Mirika is impressed by Kunon's concentration, but then he suggests they talk a little. Mirika questions whether that is a good idea. The protagonist reassures her, saying they will wait until he wakes up. Even so, Marika appears worried. Still, Kunon says she doesn't need to worry, as he can destroy the wall in an instant. In the afternoon, Zion wakes him by falling from the waterbed and asks how long he has been asleep. Dario informs him it has been 2 hours. He then gets up and asks the protagonist why he is so calm, if he has given up. Kunon replies that not at all, he was just waiting for him to wake up. Then we see him cast a spell, and a large amount of foam begins to cover the wall. The protagonist explains that since it is an earth wall, it becomes fragile when absorbing too much water, comparing this to hard bread. Zeon smiles at him, says Kunon got everything right, except for the purpose of the hard bread, but asks why he used the robot, questioning whether his specialty isn't Auri. Kunon replies that he is right, but thought it would be easier this way. Zeon acknowledges his ingenuity. Kunon takes this as an acceptance to be his disciple. However, Zeon becomes irritated with his haste, although in the end he accepts him as a disciple. Kunon celebrates this achievement with his fiancée, which clearly irritates Zeon. Then, he makes it clear that from now on, he, the master, will take precedence over the fiancé, as Kunon will have much to learn and will participate in his experiments. That said, he asks Mirika what she will do, since, while Kunon continues to grow and accumulate success, women have begun to compete for him. Mirika understands what he means, and starts to tremble at the thought of being taken away from him. He does not realize this, and asks Z only not to treat Mirika that way. He confronts him, saying that he says this but actually likes to tease the girls. He is the type who only realizes when it's too late, teasing the girls he likes only to see them being won over by others. All these sharp words hit directly to the heart and mind of poor Zeoli. That night, we see Marika looking out the window, thinking about what the master said, as she knows he is right, and that if things continue like this, she and Kunon will soon be separated. The next day, Zeon arrives once again accompanied by Princess Marika, and immediately calls Kunon, saying that he is the luckiest boy in the world to have the privilege of being trained by the best wizard from all over the kingdom. Kunon, who at this point is already a master at kissing ass, starts flattering Zeon right away, saying that he is certainly the luckiest in the world to be trained by the luckiest man. Handsome from the Zeon kingdom looks satisfied, smiles, and says that today's work will be hard, and that Kunon shouldn't expect him to take it easy. Kunon starts acting like he's in a soap opera holding the head, and saying that if Zeon went easy on him, he would think that his master doesn't love him anymore. Zeon is a little uncomfortable with the little pervert tells him to behave and takes him inside, however. As soon as they enter the room, Kunon's excitement disappears when he realizes that his job for the day will be to copy the memos that Zeon created. transforming them into proper documents with good handwriting. Kunon knows that this is basically the work of Xion himself, who is too lazy to do it and is pushing everything onto him just when Kunon was excited to learn all kinds of magic that day. But unfortunately, he has no choice and accepts the job. Xion turns to the rest of the group and tells everyone to get lost, saying that those documents are national secrets that no one but him can read. Kunon apologizes to Mirika and promises to finish the work soon, to come back to her. Mirika smiles and leaves the room along with the others. After that, Xion turns to Kunon and asks him to create the waterbed he made the day before. Kunon uses his magic immediately and creates a comfortable and warm waterbed without saying a word. Xion throws himself on top of it and falls into a deep sleep. Kunon lets out a sigh and starts working while Mirika takes Aiko to the gazebo outside and tells her that in the last few days he has been trying to learn how to fight with a sword but asks her to don't reveal this to Kunon. Yet Aiko is surprised since it's not common for princesses to learn swordsmanship but agrees to keep it a secret. Mirika soon gets ready, takes her wooden sword and enters the arena to facing Dario. They start to duel and it becomes clear that Mirika started training recently. But he is progressing fast. He wants to become good enough for Kunon. She knows he carries the hero scar, which means he will become extremely famous, and feels she needs to match him with their own skills and talents, so that both are seen as equal in the eyes of everyone back in the room. Kunon continues deciphering the letters of the ancient parchments, and keeps getting stuck because the writing on them is simply horrible, making it difficult to know what is a letter and what is a diagram. As he struggled to understand one of the memos, Xion wakes up from his nap seemingly completely reinvigorated. He then turns his attention to Kunon and asks how far he's gotten with the task. Kunon responds that it's almost halfway done instead of praising him, but Xion starts teasing him by saying that even a blind person would work faster than him. Kunon counters by stating that anyone would go blind. Trying to read that handwriting, he says that even an earthworm covered in mud and dragged over the paper would have better writing. Xion tells him not to compare his masterful work to a simple worm, but Kunon replies that he will definitely send an invoice for all the extra work he is doing. Being forced to do it, Xion warns him not to be too smart since he is being trained at that exact moment. Kunon is surprised, but Xion explains that what you read in a book is just as information in the brain and ends up being forgotten over time as what the brain needs to interpret and what the hands write down ends up being fixed in the deepest parts of the mind, being recorded as knowledge that is difficult to forget. Kunon finally understands the reason for waxing and unwaxing and is grateful for the training. Soon the night arrives and Xion prepares to leave. Once again, he tells Kunon to finish all the remaining work before the next visit. But before Xion leaves, Kunon stops him and asks about those strange diagrams in one of the memos that they looked like a spell. Xion thinks a little and realizes that it would be easier to show than explain, so he tells Kunon to visit him in the capital. Next time he will show him. Kunon gets excited and soon turns to the princess, saying that soon there will be. Again, the next day he returns to the capital and prepares to enter the Black Tower once again. He ends up surrounded by royal magicians happy to see him back, who start asking all kinds of questions before Kunon can even answer. Xion appears and tells him to follow him inside. King asks Xion why the hell he is taking Kunon there, and horrified asks if he intends to take him to the room of demons. Xion doesn't even give a damn. The work of explaining and orders Kunon to create the waterbed that works perfectly, putting all the curious students to sleep. They start walking again, and on the way Xion asks if Kunon knows something about magical weapons. Kunon responds that magical weapons are special weapons capable of channeling the magic of their user. Xion nods and explains that there are specialized mages whose only function is to create magical weapons for real wizards. So he opens the door to his office and reveals an entire room covered in dust and parchments. Kunon is amazed and excited, starting to leaf through the parchments with enthusiasm, finding one new spell after another, all new to him. As he searches one of the piles, he finds a special magic book accessible only to a select group of real magicians and declares that he will use the power of nepotism to gain access to this book. He excitedly turns to Xion and says he wants to live there forever. Xion turns around and responds that he doesn't need to live there because in the future he can have everything if he wants. Then he directs his attention to a box in front of him, explaining that he has been working for a few months in a special magical tool. The diagram that Kunon had seen the day before was precisely the outline of that tool. Kunon approaches and opens the box only to find it empty. Confused, he asks Xion what exactly that does. Xion responds that he is trying to create a device capable of giving them anything they want without having to move. For example, if he wanted an apple, the device would create one for them. Kunon says he would love to have something like that, especially to make pancakes. Xion replies that with the help of Kunon's water magic, he finally can start the product testing phase. and release it on the market. Zeon explains that his earth magic can take care of the external structure, while Kunon's water magic can handle the delicate and moving internal parts of the Kunon device, realizes that it can really be successful, and agrees to work alongside Zeon. Soon after, they go down for lunch, and it is there that the director of magicians tells Kunon about the magic school and witchcraft, where wizards from all over the world travel to study Kunon. He had never heard of it, and is excited by the idea. Zeon tells him not to think too much about it at the moment. Only wizards above 12 years old can enroll, as Kunon is only 10. Yet can't do anything. 2 years have passed since that day. And finally, Zeon decides to test Kunon on everything he learned in that period. They take position in front of Zeon and the others, and Kunon prepares himself with his water magic to defend himself from whatever Zeon decides to throw at him. Zeon smiles, creates several thorns with his earth magic, and fires them at Kunon, who is forced to use compound magic to create countless drops of water that absorb the impact and return like a tsunami towards the Zeon, breaking right at his feet. Zeon smiles and says that he passed the test, leaving Kunon beaming with happiness. After that, they enter the house again, where Aiko brings a magic pot that creates a fresh pie, just with the use of Miraca magic, proves and states that the flavor is like something fresh out of the oven. Kunon also says that their product was a success in the market, but complains that he didn't even see a coin, since all the money went straight into Zeon's pocket. Later in the office, Marika observes the room and comments that Kunon and Zeon have already collaborated on more than 5 successful magical devices. Kunon says that another is already in development, and that they have also released 5 new theories of magic in their new magic manual. Zeon turns to him and says that he no longer needs to worry about the device in who we're working, remembering that he will be 12 in the spring and must prepare for magic school early. Kunon refuses to go, believing that Zeon is the only teacher he has it needs. But Zeon explains that he is an earth magic user and cannot teach much about water magic. Besides, the world is huge, and the magic school is home to many extraordinarily strong water mages. Kunon still doesn't want to go, but Marika gives him the final push, saying that he should leave and become a great sorcerer, promising that she will also work on herself and become a great woman when they meet again later that night, after saying goodbye to Zeon. For the last time, Kunon returns to his office and reflects on how over the past few years he has become so accustomed to not using eyes and feeling everything around him that he ended up forgetting his greatest ambition to create a pair of functional eyes for himself. He realizes that the only way to achieve this is to become stronger and better as a mage, and this will only be possible if he is trained by a true water mage. Several days pass while he is overcome by an obsession with finding a way to create functional eyes after countless trials and errors. One fine morning, he finally succeeds. He realizes he was thinking too much about complex things, when the answer was very simple. All he needed to do was to create a mirror, capable of reflecting the world and transmitting this image to his brain, allowing him to understand what he was seeing. With this in mind, he starts working immediately, and little by little. Then he opens his eyes for the first time in his life, seeing the landscape in front of him. Tears flow from his eyes. Something that also happens for the first time. He walks around the room looking at the books, and finally he approaches the window to see his reflection, when he suddenly notices a gigantic insect monster standing behind him. To his surprise, the crab simply stands still, without moving. Shortly afterwards, Kuno realizes that the thing doesn't really pose a threat to him. He then turns his attention to his invention and uses magic to create a mirror in front of him. From the moment he decided to learn magic, he made a vow. After he finished creating a new pair of eyes for himself, he would face directly the person he hated most, himself. He remembers all the times his parents and servants had to go out of their way to make sure he didn't get hurt. Mirror is ready. Kuno finally opens his eyes and observes himself carefully. He notices that he doesn't look very tall and that he doesn't have any beard to speak of, but concludes that this is probably due to the fact that he is still a child. Then he turns back to the crab and tries to start a conversation with him. However, the crab remains as mute as before, staring into space, without moving a single muscle in his body. Kuno then calls Iko, who appears immediately. She doesn't even glance at the crab and continues talking to Kuno, asking if he wanted anything. Suddenly, she notices a strange magical sphere floating near him and notices that his eyes are open and not closed, as usual. Filled with joy, she asks if he was able to create with success a pair of functional eyes. Kuno smiles and nods, and Aiko throws herself at him to congratulate him, but ends up throwing the magic sphere into the air, which leaves Kuno extremely dizzy. She says they need to tell his father immediately, and says she will prepare a feast that same day in his honor. Iko doesn't look at the crab again, who continues staring at him in an empty way, as he wonders if he shouldn't just ask Iko to cook it and serve it for dinner. Then he looks back at Iko, and notices that she appears to have a horn on her head. He seriously asks if she really has a horn, but Iko jokingly responds that she only has a horn when she's angry, and that it disappears when she's happy. Kuno doesn't really know what. I have to think about it, but reflect that, for some reason, I had never imagined Iko with a horn on her head. He then realizes that he needs to keep practicing his cold approach tactics if he wants to become a real wrestler, and without wasting any time, he starts flirting with her, saying that the horn her makes it very horny. Kiko doesn't know what to answer, so the two simply go outside. This is the first time that Kunon has been able to see the outside world with his own eyes. He stops in the field and observes a beautiful landscape of meadows, lawns, distant mountains, and a castle in the center. Surprisingly, however, he does not see things as a normal person would. The colors seem all inverted, as if they were not calibrated correctly. The sun appears black to him, the bright blue sky appears as a dull purple, and the grass is a pale, almost dead blue. Even Kunon feels that something is wrong, because no book has ever mentioned a black sun or a sky so purple. Iko approaches him from behind, helps him put on a cloak to protect him from the cold, and says that they must go to his parents' mansion to give the good news. Finally, Kunon decides to ask the question that has been bothering him for a while, and asks Iko if she can see the giant crab behind him. Does Kunon think is just creating fanciful stories, and tells him to make her look really cool in the story. Kunon realizes that it is completely useless to argue with that woman, so they continue walking through the meadows with the crab towards his father's mansion. He knows that the experiment was an absolute success. After all, now he can see everything. Still, something eats away at his mind, and he feels that something went wrong during the experiment, as he has the feeling that he shouldn't be seeing some of the things he is seeing. Upon arriving at the mansion, he finally sees his brother in a literal way, and not just metaphorical as before, which would certainly please many commentators who had personal problems with writing. His mother and brother are extremely happy to know that he finally can see, and his mother starts to cry while looking at him with a smile, while his brother praises him for doing something that had never been done before. Kunon, however, can barely concentrate on all this, because he sees his brother with a beautiful pair of wings, as if he had just returned from a stop. Of pride. While his mother has different colored eyes, he thinks they both look incredibly stylish, and wonders why no one has ever told him about these things. He tells his mother that she looks like the heroine of a play about a princess, and comments that her brother also seems really nice, even asking if they are some kind of second-rate angels, like this family seems to have a habit of never answering directly. The brother just says he doesn't know anything about it. Then, Kuno turns to Oko, and asks if people from that world can have wings. Nico acts like a teacher, and says that everyone is born with wings, and that Kuno only finally opened his wings when he reached his full potential. At that moment, he realizes that he is surrounded by idiots, and concludes that things like the crab, the horn, eyes, and feathers can only be seen by him, which means something is definitely wrong. Suddenly he hears his father running towards the room, and he asks what he would look like, but to his annoyance, his father appears looking like a Nickelodeon contestant after being showered with green slime. Still, his father congratulates him, happy for his achievement, and states that he will immediately send a letter to the capital reporting Kuno's success. A little later, everyone leaves the room, leaving only Kuno and his brother. Kuno then thinks he can finally ask some questions, and wonders if his father is usually a ball of slime. His brother immediately tells him to shut up, saying that his father would end up crying if he heard so much truth coming from his own son. Kuno sighs and just smiles, thinking that the combined level of strangeness in that house is less than that of a broken lamp, and decides that he will do all his questions directly to your teacher. The next morning, your wishes come true when the royal carriage from the capital arrives, carrying Princess Mirika, Cerdario, and Zu. Kuno himself runs immediately to welcome Mirika and welcomes her warmly in his mansion. Mirika is extremely happy to learn that Kuno has seen again, and states that he achieved something that no one else had been able to do to this day. Kuno keeps his eyes closed, afraid to look at his future wife, and fearing what he could see, but Mirika asks him to open them because she wants him to see her as she really is. Kunon opens his eyes slowly and observes her, noticing her regal posture, her beautiful blonde hair shining in the sun like millions of golden threads, and her delicate and serene smile. Just when he thinks that, at least, his bride wouldn't have anything strange, he notices a single feather at the top of her head, and lets out a sigh of pure exhaustion. Erica interprets this as disapproval and starts to feel insecure. So Kunon immediately uses his flirting skills to make her feel better, comparing it to a dove feather flying freely through the sky. At that moment, Dario gets out of the carriage and says that this dove has been improving more and more in fencing, and that now it is more like a hawk than to a dove. Kunon notices a beautiful ethereal sword on his back and asks about it, but Darius thinks he means the common sword and starts talking about the steel and how it was forged in fire. Kunon then realizes that the ethereal sword is not real and that his eyes are just playing tricks. Suddenly, he hears Zoe's voice coming from behind, and when looking at him, he sees a light golden color so intense emanating from his body that nothing can be seen because of the glow. Kunon covers his eyes and asks if he is really the teacher, saying that he can't see anything because of the clarity. Zoe thinks that Kunon is just praising and responds that he was always brilliant and had a luminous presence. Kunon doesn't know how to make those self-centered idiots understand what he really means. He covers his eyes again, asks to talk alone with Zoe, and manages to take him to a room where he reveals everything he is seeing. Zoe just laughs at the absurd situation, unable to believe that Kunon sees Marika as a girl with a single feather on top of her head. Kunon asks him not to take his problems as a joke, as he doesn't want to get married while he has a crab always by his side, and Marika has a feather on her head for no reason at all. Zoe then reflects on the fact that Kunon sees colors differently than normal, and comes to two possible conclusions. The first is that Kunon may be seeing the shape of people's souls, which would mean that the crab is a representation of his own soul. The second possibility is that he is suffering from a severe case of magical illness, which is causing hallucinations, visuals. Zoe remembers a time when he crossed a forest with an extremely strong magical field, became ill, and began to see strange creatures, as if he were drunk. Kunon realizes that the situation is very similar, but he states that there is still not enough data to decide what is true. Furthermore, he explains that each animal sees the world in different colors, and this does not mean that his vision is defective, advising Kunon to see his vision as a gift. When they leave the room, the sun is already setting. Iso starts to laugh when he imagines Mirika with a feather on her head. Next night, everyone celebrates Kunon's 15th birthday. It also marks the beginning of a new journey, as the next day he would leave for the Magic Academy. His father gives him a new wooden staff, his mother presents him with a new set of writing quills, and his brother gives him a book with good places to eat, becoming something like the Michelin guide of his time. Later that night, Marika reveals her own gift, which turns out to be a bracelet of which she has a matching pair. Kunon says how much he will miss her and promises to come back as soon as possible. They hold each other's hands for the last time in a long time under the moonlight. The next day, the whole family gathers to say goodbye. The mother can't hold back her tears while the father asks her to be strong, thinking that Kunon would have a lot of difficulty leaving and would end up crying in front of them. To everyone's surprise, this doesn't happen. Kunon doesn't even hug them. He simply gets into the carriage, says, "I said family," and leaves, commenting that maybe he'll be back in a few years, or maybe not. Sitting comfortably next to Aiko, he starts to dream about all the new people he's met. You will find at the academy, and imagining how strong the wizards there are. Kunon and Iko continue their journey for 5 days. After that, Iko starts to get bored and asks how long it will take to get to the gym, but doesn't reveal that the gym is quite far away, so the best estimate would be about a month's travel before they get there. He knows that Aiko has already decided that she won't go to the gym with him, but he still asks her if she's sure about her decision. Aiko responds, who has been of marriageable age for some time and wants to get married and settle down to start her life in the truest sense of the word. She states that if she continues to follow Kunon, she will become too old to get a good marriage. She says it's now or never, because if she gives up now, it will be like giving up completely on the idea of having a life. Kunon tries to do emotional blackmail and asks her if she thinks that he could live without her. Riko counters by saying that if that really were the case, then he would be willing to leave Princess Marika aside and marry her. Instead, Kunon, immediately silent, knowing he has no answer to that, and looks out the window where finally the view in the distance is his grandfather's mansion. They finally arrive at the mansion, and Kunon tries to remember the last time he was there. Iko remembers it perfectly and responds that about 4 years ago, Kunon forced the whole family to come there after hearing that his grandfather had a huge library full of magic books. At that time, Kunon was doing everything he could to learn magic in any way possible, so he forced his family to accompany him. He even did an embarrassing dance TikTok style until everyone agreed to come. Kunon smiles when the door behind him opens and his grandfather appears happily, with open arms saying he missed him a lot, and he doesn't respond with his. The same energy runs to him, and the two begin to hug, although he still continues to see strange things like several demonic horns on his grandfather's head. The old man says that to celebrate the fact that he has been accepted into the Magic Academy, he will buy anything he wants as a gift. Rich tries to interrupt him and clears his throat before saying that, first of all, Kunon's mother, I wanted him to read the letter he sent. However, his grandfather doesn't seem to hear it, and continues asking if Kunon wants jewelry. Already calling a jeweler until Aiko insists again that he read his daughter's letter first. He then takes the letter to the office, puts on his reading glasses, and becomes immediately irritated because his daughter already knew his habits and imposed a limit on how much money he could spend on Kunon, saying that it should not exceed $10,000, he complains, stating that $10,000 they are nothing in the current economy. But Kuno remembers that she is still only 12 years old, while Aiko comments that this amount is equivalent to 3 months of her salary, yet her grandfather remains determined to buy something big for his grandson and says that it wouldn't be a problem if they didn't tell his mother, but Kuno says that what he really wants now is a new maid, since Iko won't accompany him from now on. From that moment, the grandfather then introduces Rinko to Iko's younger sister, who also has a horn on her head. Rinko greets Kunon warmly and says that he accepted the job because his sister recommended it, and the payment wasn't bad at all. She wants to save money for the wedding. She already has a fiancé and makes it clear that she is not open to any happy ending service. Kunon replies that she doesn't need to worry because he also has a beautiful fiancé, and that both of them should value above all the people they are going to marry. Rinko agrees, saying that she and her fiancé intend to open a store in the future, so he's also saving up for this. Shortly after, the maids start preparing the dinner table, and Rinko comments that he was expecting a spoiled boy because of the hero's supposed scar, but Kunon he seems to be very calm. Iko explains that he mainly cares about magic and often forgets to eat, so Rinko should always leave some sandwiches ready for him to eat. While studying this makes Zico remember everything that went through with him when Kuno's father hired her specifically to take care of his strange son. She was confused, but soon began to feel comfortable, truly care about him, and the two of them went through many ups and downs together. She remembers the first time Kunon wore his uniform to school, and the first time he got to see. She sees it with her own eyes. The memory saddens her, and she turns to the corner to say that regardless of his reputation, Kunon is still just a child, and trusts people too much, so it will be her responsibility to keep him away from any danger. Rinko comments that Kunon has a charming personality and knows how to compliment a woman, which makes him easy target for all the girls at the gym, increasing the chances of him becoming a womanizer. Aiko can't stand the idea and tells his sister to shut up, saying that Kunon is an angel and would never do anything. So the next morning, Kunon packs his bags and prepares to leave when Iko goes to his room to tell him that the carriage is ready. He thanks her for everything she has done for him so far, saying that he would never have become the man he is today without her, and comments that it will probably be a few years before they see each other again. Aiko tells him not to worry because he will be waiting, and that maybe by then she will already be a married woman with a son of her own. They hug, and then Kunon gets into the carriage next to Rinko. His grandfather begs him to stay and live in hiding with him, but Kunon doesn't listen and sets the carriage in motion, leaving his grandfather and Aiko behind along the way. He turns to Rinko and asks if she's really okay with leaving her fiancé, since she'll be taking several years until he can see him again. Rinko responds that this won't be a problem, as he has already talked to him about the decision, as they intend to open a business together. They need money when Kunon asks what kind of business they plan to open. Rinko says they decided to open a restaurant since she likes to cook day after day. They get closer to their destination until they finally enter the kingdom of Harsh Sheik, known for its strong connection with magic. As they walk through the streets, Rinko notices that the entire city seems to have a magical theme as they pass by a store. Kunon notices several interesting-looking magic books and decides to go in to have a look. He is impressed by the selection available Rino, but asks what is so special as his grandfather owns a library with thousands of books. Kunon explains that he has read all the books in his grandfather's library, but that there weren't many volumes really focused on magic since that store was dedicated exclusively to magic tomes, and they were all incredibly rare when Rinko asks if he intends to buy any. Kunon says that this would require a huge amount of money when checking the price of a single copy. Rinko is shocked to see that it could cost up to $5 million. She comments that she wouldn't win that amount not even in several lifetimes, and that even a quarter of that amount would be enough to open your restaurant and even several branches. Kunon laughs and explains that those books are unique, and that's why they cost a fortune before they could leave a woman with glasses approaches, and asks Kunon if he is a wizard, and if he studies at the Magic Academy, he smiles and replies that for now, he is just a candidate for woman shows great interest, and asks him to show what kind of magic he knows how to use. Kunon decides to impress her and creates a small cat with his magic, which is a huge success because she immediately starts to caress it, saying it's one of the cutest things he's ever seen. Kunon asks if she's also a magician, but she replies that she wasn't blessed with enough talent. Even though she loves magic, which is why Hu decided to work in that area, she also comments that this year will be intense in Durachik, as the Saint of the Sacred Kingdom will also enroll, then shows a book saying that she is the first copy of the work of the most famous sorcerer Zhou, and who is willing to sell it at a big discount. Kunon, however, refuses the offer and leaves the store with Rinko, explaining afterwards that copy, it was probably a copy he made when he worked with Zhou. Later, they enter another store that sells all kinds of clothes. Rinko starts trying on several pieces while Kunon feels the texture of the fabrics around him. He asks the shopkeeper which animal the certain skin was taken from, and the man replies that it is dark fox fur. Kunon reflects for a moment, and then he creates a shadowy fox right in front of him. The shopkeeper is shocked because the animal looks absolutely real, which leaves him confused. He doesn't reveal that he can create anything as long as he knows how she is to the touch. The logist then starts to think and asks maliciously if he could create a woman for him. This infuriates Rinko, who tells the salesman to control himself and calls him of incel before leaving the store indignant. They leave the small town and head towards the capital of Darik. After a few days, they finally arrive and are greeted by the sight of a huge magical academy, even bigger than Kunon had imagined. Rinko asks where they will live, and Kuno tells her not to worry, as they will get a dormitory where she can stay with him. However, when they enter, her hopes are destroyed when the receptionist informs him that all the dorms are already full and that he should have registered in advance without knowing what to do. They leave the gym, and Rinko suggests that they stay in a hotel. Nan responds that they intend to stay there for several years and that the hotel would be too expensive. Perhaps it would be better to rent a room at that moment. The receptionist named Lu goes after them and delivers some pamphlets with contact details of real estate agents who can show properties in the surrounding area. Kunon's eyes light up as he imagines renting a house just for the two of them and living in a healthy way, independent as he did in his country of origin. On the same day, they managed to rent a beautiful house close to the academy. The next morning, they return for the entrance test. But Lo informs Rinko that she can enter as only students and staff are allowed to pass that point. Rinko tries to bribe her, but it doesn't work. While Rinko waits outside, Lu leads Kunon down a corridor to a grassy field where he finds 3 other people waiting to be evaluated. And it is at this moment that the story ends, leaving the rest for the next chapter.